We are going to be talking all about community building in Web3. As the title suggests, it could be kind of messy. So we have an awesome panel lined up, and we'll go over some anecdotes and advice on how to do this well. We can start off with intros. I'm Eshita. I'm a research analyst on the Messari team, and we can just go down the line.
Hey, what's up, guys? My name is Tiff. I lead marketing at Magic Eden. Hope everyone had lunch and is well rested. It's going to be an amazing session. Thanks for being here.
Hey, everyone. James here, co-founder of Jet Protocol. And yeah, really great to be here and see everyone.
Hi, I'm Derek. I've actually known James for like 4 years, so it's kind of nice to actually meet in person for the first time. I started building communities 4.5 years ago and turned it into a business, and I'm still here and get to chat about it with these great people.
Cool. And yeah, I'm Corey. I'm the growth lead at dYdX protocol.
Awesome. Thank you all for being here. So this is specifically a conversation about building community in Web3. And to kind of understand what that means, let's talk a little bit about communities in Web 2 and how do they compare to Web 3, and what is it that Web 3 offers that's unique? Start here. Yeah.
My past life, I worked at kind of like Web 2 tech startups, a little bit of agency work doing community management. And essentially, you're just pumping a product, answering questions that are not of a legally sensitive nature or regulatorily sensitive nature. And it's pretty straightforward, kind of scalable. And Web3 is kind of none of that. I mean, you can be pumpy as well in some cases, but typically if you're head of marketing, head of community, you are an extension of the project that you work for. Whether you work for the dev shop that's building the protocol, whether you work for the foundation or some other arm, you really have a lot more weight on your shoulders in terms of how you conduct yourself and what you put forward into the world. So that's the biggest difference as far as my experience goes.
I think the other big difference is the incentives, right? Whether it's a speculative project or a DAO where you're expected to contribute something to the DAO and therefore get something in return. I think that's the really big difference. Community is, I think it's always been a mix of customer support, marketing, user acquisition, et cetera, depending on the goals of the community. But otherwise, the incentives and the reasons people are joining Web3 communities, I think, are vastly different, whether it's investment, quote unquote, related, or you're building a brand new thing from the ground up and want other people to contribute so that they elevate themselves in the community.
Yeah, similar sentiment. I think one of the main things is kind of like the shared vision of Web3 communities. I think is a really big distinction between Web 2 communities. As you guys kind of talked about in Web 2, there's no really concept of communities because people are just using the product. They're kind of extracting whatever value they want to out of said product, and in return, they don't really get anything. But in Web3, yes, typically there is some product that people are using, but in addition to that, there could be some sort of shared values, some shared vision of the community that they want to achieve over the long term. And oftentimes, a token is part of that shared vision. And how do you make that token grow in popularity, grow in interest over time? Partially, that could be investment related, as you said, but also it could just be sharing kind of the gospel and basically creating a tribe of your own community. And the token is potentially an extension of that.
Yeah, I guess before, what exactly is community, right? I think for me, I distinguish marketing and community as two different things. Marketing is one-way communication of my message that I'm trying to say to you, whereas community means that you yourself as a stakeholder, you have a vested interest, or that you have a meaningful part of playing a role in a certain type of entity or organization. So, I guess in a Web 2 sense, right? Nike has communities. They have running clubs where people get together and get to socialize with each other, but that is that doesn't really have any, you don't have any ownership as part of that running club, right? Whereas I think in the world of Web3 and especially NFTs, it's about being able to own part of the community that you're with. And I think like it's been really interesting to kind of see Web2 brands getting into Web3. But yeah, like I think before even thinking about what Web3 community is, I think, you know, just aligning on the definition of community being a two-way street where like both sides are vested in the ownership of something is like probably good.
Awesome. So this is another question for the panel. Maybe we can start with Corey. What are some mistakes that communities are making when onboarding a user for the first time?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think sometimes communities may only want to like focus on maybe like token price, let's say. You know, if someone comes into the Discord and like the first thing that they see is like the token price channel, I'm not exactly sure that's like the healthiest thing in the long run. It could be good in the short term to get like people excited and basically get people to like shill your token or product in Twitter and whatnot. But long term, it's really hard to control like token price. And as we all know, like token price does not just go up forever. And so as soon as it starts to go down, those same people that were, you know, perhaps your most active community members, let's say, tend to disappear. And so I think after all of that, there needs to be some sort of like shared values that people have that is not just about the token price. And whether that is like building the product or maybe just like aligning on the vision of like DeFi or NFTs or you know, gaming, whatever it may be. Ensuring that people are there kind of like for the long term and the right reasons is likely going to pay dividends over the long term rather than like short-term speculators.
Yeah, I think in the world of NFTs too, right? Like everyone is trying to figure out how do we get mass adoption or how do we get new people into the ecosystem. And I think oftentimes NFTs are framed as like NFTs, like, oh, buy this NFT, it's gonna moon, or like be part of this community. But ultimately, what's really going to unlock mass adoption is if we can articulate these ideas in a way where a normal person can receive them and find value from them, right? So for example, like, you know, if there's like somebody who's trying to do an NFT project, is it really about saying buy an NFT, or is it about expressing, like having empathy for the community that you're trying to build and the utility that they're trying to receive and framing a project in that way? So I think like there's a lot more creativity that can be seen from the NFT side in order to actually build communities that are sustainable and also are not just the same like audience, like not just a crypto native audience.
I think one of the biggest mistakes I've seen some projects take with their community, like their platform, whether it's Discord or Telegram, is assuming anybody's actually read the website first, or the white paper, or whatever documentation is out there. There's so many people their form of aping in is just joining the community and then start asking all these super basic questions. And you know, and then people are like, well, did you read the website? No, they didn't. And so you need to kind of route around that and help them get to a place where they are interested to go back to the website or go to the resources channel or something like that and do at least a little bit of reading so that they can further themselves and their knowledge of the project, and then ask more insightful questions that will hopefully elicit, you know, better discussion than go read this, go read that.
Is it up to the community to make sure that the users are reading all the documentation, or how do you make sure they know where to go?
I think if you have the tools to make sure to bring that into the platform, that's great, because like I said, they've heard about it from a friend, and so they've joined the Discord or they've joined the Telegram or the subreddit or what have you, and they just have all these questions that they just want to get out there. So at least knowing where to find that information, maybe do a little bit of copying and pasting to get them reading right there, and then saying if you want to go read more, you know, go read docs.whatever.com is an okay approach. Or you know, having some sort of FAQs that at least they can get a basic knowledge of without reading a 25-page white paper, because clearly they're not that interested yet to dive that deep.
I mean, I just think the funnels to Web3 are like kind of difficult, right? Like it's really hard to convert, like coming from a marketing point of view, it's hard to convert traffic into a community, just period. I mean, I think a lot of people rely on Twitter as a discovery channel, and then there's like Discord. But if you're trying to bring someone into your community from Instagram or TikTok or just a website, it's just really hard to build those on-ramps given all like the hurdles of on-ramping into Web3. So I think like there needs to be like a better way of actually acquiring users and like being able to express like the value of that community to them instead of kind of explaining things in certain channels that only reach a certain demographic. Yeah.
So Derek, you manage an agency that goes into different projects and helps them manage communities. So what's on your checklist for what you do when you first arrive into a community?
First, actually join the community and see what's going on. So see what information is available, what format it's available. It's available in. Second, like actually look at the existing community. See who's there, what types of people are there, what types of questions they're asking, what types of discussions are happening. Because if somebody has approached us and asked us to help out, whether it's just purely on a moderation basis, like just making sure the Discord's clean, there is no price talk, etc., or they actually want us to craft a strategy and execute it, we need to see what's already there. We can't help that community grow unless we actually understand that community. And then, just kind of evaluating what's there versus what the goals are and figuring out then like how to fill those gaps. And very much respecting the existing community that's there so that they feel like the changes that you're making, potentially, that they're actually going to benefit them and benefit new people growing because they want to see the project grow too, whatever that means to them. And ultimately, those changes need to make sense from that perspective.
I would also add, you want to set up the culture of the organization so that community managers are not simply gatekeepers of information. In my case, at least with Jet, there's a lot of developers that are in the Discord, are in the forums, asking questions, answering questions. I tend to find that communities like that where active community members have an outlet to actually get their questions answered and engage with the people that are literally writing the code, I've always found that to be a benefit. So that's another thing I'd say is something, just to keep that in mind is it's not just about making sure that you're covered on time zones so that you can go and like delete spam or whatever. It's like it's also like who's actually answering questions, who's available to to be active across the org.
Yeah, I would echo that sentiment as well. But the one thing I would note is it's probably not scalable for like core developers to be the ones ushering in community forever, right? Like eventually, developers have to spend time like doing their main job, which is like building said product. But at least from dYdX's perspective, I think one thing that has really been successful is that after building a product, you end up getting some people who are really excited about your product, and those people end up becoming like core advocates for you within Discord and other social media channels. And over time, if you spend time trying to convert those people to become like full-time community managers, I think that's actually been a very successful route that we've gone down. And some of our main community managers started out just like proactively answering people's questions in the forums. And then over time, we kind of reached out directly to them, established a relationship with them, even in some instances brought them on board as like part-time or full-time employees. And that's been like a really good way to unlock the power of like the community. So basically what I'm saying is if you see someone that's really engaged, don't let them churn. Basically figure out a way for them to like maybe come on and work with you instead of just like being a member of the community forever that isn't necessarily receiving any like value or a salary or whatever it may be. There are ways in which to get people to organically come to your community and then have them stick around over the long term.
So once you have your user and they're well acquainted with the community, how do you do that job of making sure they're incentivized and engaged in the long run? Kind of like what you were saying.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really good question that I don't think has great answers. I think it really comes down to the first point in the beginning of the discussion, which is like creating a shared vision of what you want this protocol or community to be over time. I think ultimately that's the main thing that is really sustainable. It shouldn't be about the token price, but it should really be about like creating some sort of mission statement or core values that everyone is working towards together. And the community plays a really important part of that. The developers play an important part of that. So on and so forth. There are all these different like subsectors of what a DAO could be, and like community is a core part of it. But there are also other things that make the whole team and the whole protocol kind of work. And just ensuring that everyone is aligned on all of those core values, I think, is the main thing to make it successful.
Yeah, I think early on, one of the really big wins for us was like reaching out to these contributors, like these I don't know, crowdsourced community members early on, and like literally setting up and having a call with them, assuming they didn't want to be doxxed, but just leave their cameras off or whatever. But these were like conversations. It's like, who are you? Like, why do you want to help so much? Like, thank you. But I mean, people appreciate that. Thank yous only go so far. I mean, eventually, free labor doesn't stay free for long, so you have to pay. I believe you should definitely compensate in ways that you can, but definitely touching base with them and getting to know them, that's going to help you in the long term. And they've grown. I've seen people grow into kind of subject matter experts over time. Like they came in and they were kind of brand advocates, like rah, which is there's a place. And then a year later, year and a half later, they're basically like DeFi subject matter experts speaking to topics on a really high level. So yeah, you'd be surprised how much talent can come in the door through those channels.
Yeah, I guess so. At Magic Eden, like when we talk about community, we have two different communities that we care about, right? We have a community of creators. So in that way, it's a kind of a B2B play, and we launch and manage NFT projects, right? And then on the other side, you have a community of collectors, people who are buying NFTs, trading NFTs. And I think a way of just creating sustainability across both of those communities is to make sure that the social contracts that Magic Eden has with the creator as well as the collector are always ringing true and are consistent over time, right? So, for example, with our creators, like what can they expect from Magic Eden? They should be able to expect that we support their launch, we give them operational support, we give them the best tech, we give them the best exposure, right? And then on the collector side, they should always be able to expect that we have the best features and we are able to offer value and help them basically find the alpha and make the best decisions, right? And then the legs that we have for those communities is that on our collector side, we have something called Magic DAO, which is gated by Magic Ticket. And on the creator side, we have this entire program called Launchpad. So those, I think it's just a matter of us knowing how to operationalize, caring about these stakeholders and making sure the value propositions are always consistent. And over time, we've learned a lot from our mistakes, right? There are certain mistakes that we've made both on the collector side and on the creator side. And then that is, for us, the way of creating sustainability is being really transparent, because I think that's kind of the ethos of Web3, is owning up to the things that you've done and the ways you're going to improve and making sure that everyone is involved in that process. And so I think we've done a lot to kind of show the community over time that we want their feedback, and we get that through Twitter Spaces or Discord AMAs or even surveys. So we started doing NPS surveys on our site. So we can be more analytical and also on the ball in terms of even knowing how sentiment stands among these communities of creators and collectors that we care about. So yeah.
So James, you want to say?
I was just going to wrap up and echo what Corey said about getting those contributors involved, and same with James, because that's what we've done with a couple of our clients. Is we actually sit down and we listen. We have to. I don't live, I live in one place, so I don't know how the product acts in different parts of the world. I don't know if it's just as fast or just as performant, or if there are other issues accessing it, especially in places like China or Indonesia, where firewalls get put up and things get blocked, whether it's RPCs or your website. and ultimately, getting them involved. Like Orchid's mobile app is translated into, I think, 10 or 15 different languages. That is primarily or reviewed by people from the community, because it's one thing to push something through a translation a service and then just leave it, put it into the dApp, but there's a lot of colloquialisms that just don't translate or don't work in the context. So we've got a great guy from Russia who has provided some terrific feedback. France, Turkey, etc. Some folks in Venezuela who have translated into Spanish to make sure that it's actually the right words being used. And so we actually get them involved, and they are compensated at the same time. So yeah, it's just, you need to get the community involved, especially those brand advocates or the people who are rah, 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 as Corey and James said.
Yeah, so James, you were one of the first customer service folks at MetaMask. Could you tell us some war stories or best practices around managing users around something so important as a wallet?
All right, that was a long time ago, and I'm going to do my best to recall, but I'd say back then there wasn't really a cohesive customer support, customer success strategy in Web3. We're going back 5-6 years ago, and I'd done that kind of in the Web2 world previous to that. And one of the things that I discovered quickly is that conflating support through social media and support through actual social support channels, like support ticketing channels, is really that was dangerous back in 2017, especially with all the phishing that was going on. So I'd say the first kind of real big epidemic of phishing attacks was really tough to deal with. We really needed to ratchet down the social media and community presence as opposed to sending people through ticketing channels, which you can do. MetaMask is owned and operated by Consensus, so there's less issues around doing support as opposed to a decentralized project. So that was one big hurdle to deal with, and I'd say that knowing that people knew where they could go to ask a question, even share sensitive information, definitely helped increase confidence in people using the product, using MetaMask. But frankly, since then, there's an entire customer success department or circle at Consensus now. It's one of the biggest, departments there. So I mean, there's the work that's been done has been pushed really far in terms of innovation. And yeah, the earliest NFT issuances were the biggest pain in my ass by far. CryptoKitties was launched around the birth of my son that year, and dealing with that was just an absolute headache. I mean, it's just hilarious when I hear people talk about layer one's protocols slowing down or going down because of NFT bot issuances and stuff like that. I'm like, it's not the first time. So you want to talk about one network going down? It's well, Ethereum had these problems as bad, if not worse, back then as well. And so you're just talking going from 15 tickets a day to 500 to 1,000 tickets a day. I literally remember having 1,000 tickets a day, trying to pull people in from other departments to help. And so, I could go on, but those are two big things that stick out in my memory is the phishing epidemic and, CryptoKitties.
That's crazy. Okay, so we have only 2 minutes left. So I would love to wrap up by asking each of you, why do you personally care about community building?
Personally, we're kind of reinventing the wheel in some cases, but also not. We're moving a lot of things on chain, trying to make them more fair, et cetera. And so for me, especially as we get past this initial cohort of people who have gotten in especially past 2018, before the DeFi bull run and NFTs kind of took off last year. I I think we've reached a lot of the natural limits of people who are mentally in tune and are seeking out something like blockchains and all the problems that they can solve. And so now you need to have, it's nice to have a group of like-minded people you can join, or other people who can explain from their perspective why they're interested in a certain project. And I think that helps with buy-in right away, especially if you're still a little skeptical, but you want to see what kind of people are there, or also checking out this project. Joining and being able to converse with other people, like a Nike running club or like Fitbit's forums and stuff like that. Like it's just good to have a place to go to talk with other people.
Yeah, I think communities or DAOs are kind of like one of the largest things in crypto that we don't fully quite understand yet. And with that, there's just really interesting challenges to solve. And with that, there's also opportunity. So if one DAO could basically solve these things better than another DAO, then that could lead to a lot of success for the one that does actually solve this in a good way. So yeah, it's just like a really interesting social coordination issue that no one really has best answers or best practices quite yet. And so yeah, it's a space that requires a lot of innovation and thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I think we care about community because we care about our users, right? I mean, NFTs, so Magic Eden is at kind of an inflection point right now. We are the dominant marketplace on Solana, and we just moved to Ethereum yesterday. So we're going to be on both chains and hopefully more to come. But we care about community because those are critical to unlocking these chains, right? Like, what kind of projects are we going to be able to feature? How can we work with the community to actually broaden the impact of NFTs overall? I guess we don't really see ourselves as this company that's in an ivory tower that's just creating a transactional marketplace. We see ourselves as a place where people can discover NFTs and express themselves and demonstrate ownership. And a lot of that is something that we should do hand in hand with the community instead of Magic Eden to the user, right? We're all kind of pitching for the same goal. So that's why we care, because we have the same vision.
I'll say real quick, because I know we're over time. If you don't take care of your community, the scammers will.
Awesome. Thank you all for taking the time.